Hey everybody, this is Noe with Walk with Yah. Excuse me while I get some things in order here. You ever have those days where things just kind of come together at the last second? Well, guess what? Me too. Welcome. We're going to have another great episode for those of you that are really hungry for the things of God. Because I talk about things that they're not going to tell you in church. And so, but if you're here, I'm glad that you're here. Let me put my phone on Do Not Disturb in case the president calls or something like that. You know, that's how much I think of y'all. Okay, great. Fantastic. All right, I think I got my recording level set a little bit better this time around. Yay. So, this is Noe with Walk with Yah Ministry. Let me adjust that camera just a little bit more. There you go. That way you can see a little bit more of me. Walk with Yah tries to help teach people and helps people get rid of their spiritual oppression, because everyone has it, whether you know it or not. It's just how much do you have. Walk with Yah teaches on various aspects of spiritual warfare, even things about your human spirit, to help them get more involved, because your human spirit has a whole bunch of things that you don't know about, a whole bunch of resources and things like that. It's a part of you that really you need to kind of get to know your human spirit and get it activated. And Walk with Yah also teaches you on how to live the Bible, especially during times in the world like we're living in today, because we're really in a spiritual war if you did not know that. So, welcome back again, or if you're here for the first time, welcome. If you did not know it, I am a Torah-keeping Christian. Christian because I believe you only get into heaven, to God's kingdom, through Yeshua, through Jesus. Some people say I'm a Messianic Jew because I believe in the whole Bible, Genesis, Revelation. Don't believe in there being Old, New Testament. It's all still in play. And so, but again, some say I'm a Messianic Jew. Same difference to me. Yes, I'm a Christian. I do the Torah. I believe last October, November, thereabouts, Yah, God, directed me to include focusing on the Torah some more. So that's why you're seeing more of these teachings. And that's what I will do. I will include that as part of the repertoire. And me, myself, have been learning about and growing in the Torah, for the last 12 years or so. And I find it actually fascinating how the enemy has so twisted Yah's, God's written word. It's actually evil genius. I want to go to my little intro slide here. And so tonight we're going to talk about this, the 613 commands. Like what? Like really? Is that what it's all about? For those that keep the Torah, is that really what it's all about? And so I'm just going to jump right quick to Daniel verse 7, verses 23 and 26, where it talks about the fourth beast, which is different than all the other reigns, and is basically talking about the fourth beast, getting ahead of myself there, that it intends to change the appointed times. Meaning, the Moedim, or those appointed times where Yah or God says, I want to come meet with my people. That's on the various Sabbaths, the feast days, that type of stuff. And also says that he wants to change the Torah, the law. And so, he's going to wear out the set apart ones, the saints. And so he's been doing that. He's been doing an excellent job at that. And so that's part of the reason why I want to do this teaching tonight, because there's a lot of confusion about this. Excuse me. But here's the thing. Many Christians, most Christians, listening to this may say, but no, the Torah was done away with. Well, shalom, Madeline. Glad you could make it. I actually thought that too until I went deeper. And what I found was fascinating. I had someone challenge me with some of my beliefs, like, hey, if you look at this statement, it might actually say something different than what you were taught. And it hit me hard. And I was like, whoa. Like, I need to research this. And so, I've been teaching on, the various aspects of the Torah because it's different. I get it. Only different because we've strayed so far from the original that it seems weird to us at this point in time. And so, I've actually taught on this thus far on different topics. As you can see here, the QA 47 and different live streams, as you can see listed here. Although I'm not really a Torah teacher, I'm a minister in the areas of spiritual warfare, but I also know a few things about the Torah. I've had some pretty good teachers by some, scholars and stuff like that. Anyways, in these videos, I explain that there is no Old Testament because this Torah is still intact today. Now, of course, the fact that the temple isn't standing and we have a new mediator, a new high priest, Yeshua, Jesus, that tends to muddy the waters, but the Torah is still intact. That gives us more things that we have to consider. And even in that teaching L73, the apocalypticism, I kind of get into, why is this important? In the times that we're maybe coming into, if we're going into, tribulation times, we get into stuff like, who knows, world wars, whatever. You might want to watch that teaching, because I'm trying to help you try to get favor with Yah, with God, if at all possible, which I think it is possible, but you want to know how to do that. And so that's why I did that teaching. And so, but more specifically in this live stream number 87, the 613 commands, really, what I'm going to talk about is the supposed 613 commands. I mean, because is that all there is to the Torah? Because I believe that how the Torah has been traditionally regarded and taught in mainstream churches, Christian churches, is ludicrous. It makes no sense whatsoever. And as I've said, I think that you need to have a PhD, which can stand for, piled high and deep, to get it as wrong as it has gotten. So the hardest part of teaching this is for a person to let go of what they've been taught and their traditions of men. That's really the biggest hurdle. It's not easy. Again, as I stated, it messed me up when I was first introduced to this way of thinking. I was like, but I grew up with this. This is, what I've known to be truth. And I had to challenge my own beliefs. And then being a Torah keeper answered questions I didn't even realize that I had, meaning that everything just made more sense. It just started fitting together even better. But before I go any further, I just want to remind you that, hey, you can connect with Walk with Yah. You can do that by going to the website, www.walkwithyah, that's YAH.com. You can register for the newsletter. I try to get it out once a quarter. Just kind of let you know what's going on with the ministry. And you can connect with Walk with Yah on Rumble, on Instagram, on YouTube. Have most of my teachings out there, and also Facebook, although they tend to delete these live streams after 30 days. And so, anyways, but feel free to hit me up with questions, comments while I'm speaking. I'll try to get to them as I can. And, plus it helps the ratings and stuff like that. The more that you guys talk and ask questions, which I like. I like the questions. Even if we agree to disagree, that's fine, as long as we're respectable to one another and honor one another. That's okay. No one's going to agree on everything. You can also donate to Walk with Yah by going to www.walkwithyah.com/donations, as this ministry is funded by donations. Now, okay, so let's get back on track to the message at hand. In today's culture, spiritual, biblical, church culture, the focus is all on faith, or on perhaps this nebulous concept of love. Although, a lot of people have a hard time nailing down, well, what does love really mean? They kind of got an idea, but it doesn't answer all the questions, some things that the Bible says. It's like, well, how does that come into play? And some people's version of love doesn't really, it's not congruent. All the pieces don't fit. And so, again, a lot of people, churches today, you focus on faith. But let me ask you, have you ever wondered why Abraham was chosen? Or maybe even David, in part anyways, because, we talk about them, about, Abraham, all the faith that he had and all this type of stuff. But what else does the Bible say? In Genesis 26, verse 5, the Bible says, basically he's going to bless Abraham. Why? Because he kept Yah's instructions, commands, statutes, and laws. And we sometimes tend to skip over that. What did he have faith in? And so, in 1 Kings 11, verse 32 through 33, there is talking about David, and it says, David, who he considered to be right in observing all his statutes and all his ordinances, like David did. And so that's what faith is, is following God's command, being obedient to his commands. We tend to think of it as, I kind of know the 10 Commandments. And what a lot of people don't realize is that, the book of, Numbers and Leviticus and Deuteronomy, they're actually explaining what the 10 Commandments mean. The 10 Commandments is just a summary. How do you honor the Father? By doing his feasts, by having the priests that do these things, that do all these sacrifices. How do you honor your mother, your father? How do you, do all this stuff? So it's, if a person knows just to do the 10 Commandments, great. At least you're doing some of the Torah. So Abraham and Adam, they and many others had enough faith to be obedient, to actually be obedient. And so many people try to separate love from obedience to Yah's commands these days. They ignore the fact that this is how we prove that we, in fact, do love Yah, do love God. and that we believe that He knows best. Now, we can't follow the commands. We can't just follow the commands that we like, or not follow the commands that we don't like, or because we don't understand them. In Hebrew thought, those commands that don't really make much sense are called hukim, Chukim. And it's almost understood that you might get a bigger blessing because you're understanding them, even though you don't really get why. Anyways, there has to be a standard that we all need to have faith in. Otherwise, we're going to just be doing what they did in the book of Judges. It says there that let me put it this way. If you say that you follow a king, that means there are rules in his kingdom. The Bible, his Torah, is our constitution in a sense. As we see here in Judges 17 verse 6 and Judges 21 verse 25, and that Judges 21 verse 25 is the last sentence in the book of Judges that says, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And that's not a compliment. That's a bad thing. And so there is a standard. Even if we can't meet it fully, we still need to try. And so I know there are some gray areas, but that's what it means to be Israel. To struggle or to wrestle with Yah, with God, as we strive to understand Him and His ways. And if you're a Christian, you are a spiritual Jew. You are part of Israel. Maybe not part of the land, but you are a spiritual Jew of heart, circumcised. Your heart has been circumcised, at least. Moving on. Proverbs 3, 5, verse 7. Many of you know these verses well. Trust in Yah with all your heart. Don't lean upon your own understanding. Know Him in all your ways. Make your path straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear from Him and turn from evil. And again, a lot of times we're like, we don't understand why to do that command, so I'm not going to do it. Not the attitude to take. John 14, verse 21. He who possesses my commands and guards them is he who loves me. And he who loves me shall be loved by my Father. This is Yeshua speaking. And I shall love him. And make himself known to him. And we see the same thing in John 15, verses 9 through 10. So in following commands, we're seeing all this stuff, regarding love and, about guarding his commands and, all this love going about. This is also what love has to do with it. It's more than just a feeling. And I'll say quickly that there are people that believe that the commandments are only for, Jewish people, of blood, of heritage, and that therefore they are somehow exempt because they don't have Jewish blood, they're not from the land. Well, that opens up a whole other can of worms, but I'll just give you a few quick verses to think about, and then we'll move on. As we see in Exodus 12, verse 36, when the Jews were coming out of Egypt, there was actually a mixed multitude. It wasn't just the Jews that came out of Egypt. And in Leviticus and Numbers there, you'll see that the Bible says that, hey, the same rules are for you as well as the people that dwell with you. And there's other verses that state this as well. This is just a few that I found. So I just needed to make that point. So I just needed to rehash a little bit of, again, the Torah is still intact, it's still in place. We need to follow it. It's for everybody. And believe me, there's much more that could be said on this topic. But let's move on. Is the 613 commandments for everybody? The Orthodox people, Jewish people, focus, on the 613 commands, and they divide it, a lot of different ways: the positive, the negative commands, all this, that, and the other. And we also know that all of the commandments don't apply to everybody. Some are for the priests, some are for example, Nazarites, those taking those Nazarite vows. Some are for women, some are for lepers, etc. So, people get overwhelmed with the 613. And we also know that even if we could do all of the Torah perfectly, which we can't, it won't save us. That's actually good news. And so, let me go to the next slide here. Galatians is a very misunderstood book, because we don't tend to, there's some of the terms that kind of throw us off. And so, as you read here in Galatians 3, and for people that say that, the Torah is not intact still, Paul still uses it a lot for his arguments. So to use it, say that he's arguing against it, just kind of doesn't really make much sense. But in Galatians 3, starting in verse 17, the Bible states that the law, your book may say the law, many times it means Torah. It did not cancel out the covenant that God made with Abraham, having the faith, which was in part the Torah. But then it says in verse 19, why was the Torah added? And it states, it gives us an answer: because of transgressions, because of sin, basically. And so in verse 21 it says that the Torah is not in conflict with the promises of God. And then in verse 24 it states there that the law, the Torah, was our guardian until the Messiah came, so that we might be justified by faith. That verse 24 is a little tricky. But now that faith has come about, we are no longer under a guardian. Okay. Now some people may read verse 24, that until the Messiah came, as evidence that the Torah is no longer. I mean, it does kind of sound like that. And you can try to see it from that perspective, but there is much more biblical evidence that I don't have the time to go over tonight, as it would take a long time, that says the Torah is still intact. And so what some people argue here, or state that, is that it was the ceremonial law that was done away with. Although there's some problems with that argument too. Since basically we have a new high priest in Yeshua. And I can't say for sure, I haven't looked into that so much, but I do know the temple isn't standing, so many of the commandments can't be carried out for now anyways. So yes, you can try to make that argument, until the Messiah came, the law was our guardian. But I want to go into some more stuff to kind of refute that here. And so, again, I'll just honestly say someone could read that differently, but there's more to the picture there. As I was saying, we have a new high priest. And so that changes some things. And this is actually what Hebrews 7 and 8 are about. Because starting in Hebrews 7 is talking about the order of Melchizedek. And then it starts going into the Levitical, talking about the Levitical priesthood. And then it starts talking about that we have a new mediator being, Yeshua. And so in Hebrews 8:13 is talking about what he has made the first old, and what becomes old and growing age is near disappearing. Because again, but what he's talking about there is the priesthood, that office of the high priest, because it was held by a mortal man. It's not talking about the Torah there. But why would I agree that some of the Torah is done away with and not all? Why would I say, well, yeah, that verse we were just talking about, that, Galatians 3, verse 24. Because the moral law, those components of the Torah, are still intact. Unless you think it's okay to dishonor Yah by murdering people, by coveting, by dishonoring your parents, those parts of the Torah are still intact. I think most people can understand that and believe that. Okay, I'm not going to hang out there so much. That can get a little bit hairy, but again, you got questions, post them. I will try to get to them as I can. But I want to get to this next section. As I was telling you, I want to give you some evidences, that things to consider. And here I want to be talking about the Torah in the future. Because keep in mind that per Ezekiel chapters 40 through 47, it talks all about the third temple. Let me bring up that slide. And I'll do another video maybe on that topic as well. But basically, the animal sacrifices and other offerings will be reinstated in the third temple per Ezekiel. And when you read to the end of Ezekiel 47, it talks about the water flowing from under the temple, which, guess what, is very similar to the New Jerusalem, as it states in Revelations 22. So what we're reading here, as you'll see on the screen, is it's talking about all these different offerings, about taking, the blood of the bull and, sacrificing all these animals on the altar, of goats for the sin offerings, of rams, and stuff like that. And so the sacrifices, the Torah, will get reinstated again in the future. And you might say, like, well, why? Well, kind of like they did it prior to Yeshua. They were doing it looking to a future time. He was preparing them, for, hey, one day this is going to happen. We still have feasts that have not played out yet. We still practice those. And so, but why would we need to do that in the future? Because it's kind of like Passover. If you, in the Bible, it's like, you're going to do this. This will be a law forever for all your generations, because he did not want us to forget. So the reason that we'll be doing these sacrifices and stuff like that is because we have a tendency to forget. And he wants us to remember. A lot of times, Yeshua Jesus is like, remember what I told you. And so that's why the Jews, historically, they would repeat oral traditions. They would repeat these stories over and over again so they wouldn't forget. This is the way our mind works these days. we have so much coming at us that, heck, I forgot what news I read last week because it's coming so hard so fast. So you may want to try to argue or want to believe that the Torah has been done away with, but for me to believe that, you would have to have much stronger arguments than the points that I have, which I'm barely covering tonight. His creation, his rules is basically how I put it. So I'm just trying to show you here that some of the reasons the Torah was given was because of sin. Not for us to earn our way into his kingdom. In part, it was to help us to know what sin is, to not do it, as to not offend Yah, God. So much so that he wouldn't wipe us off the face of the earth again because we didn't love him enough to keep his commands. He will allow sin to have its way. The Torah was in part for sin to be exposed. And again, we see what happened with Noah. He got very frustrated. Hey, Christina. There you go. Speaking with the hands. Let the hands speak. At least you didn't give me that. Speak to the hand. So basically, Yah gave us his Torah to kind of keep us in line so that we so wouldn't offend him that he's going to be like, you know what? I'm going to wipe you all out again. Because we just saw that the Torah was given because of sin, because of transgressions. And he's like, look, I need to give you some type of, some rules to help you keep in line. In the United States, and elsewhere, I'm sure, I heard it said that basically the more laws and rules that you have in a given country, it's because the people aren't that very moral. And we know that the laws of this country, of other countries, get broken all the time because of immoral people. But unlike this worldly governments and such, Yah is the judge. He will know how to deal with it. He doesn't miss anything. And so, okay, but moving on. What's the point? So let me get to the crux here. And this is the argument that many people make, which is a good argument, actually. Is it all just about following commands? I mean, is he just, a slave driver and he's just, wants us to be obedient just for the sake of being obedient? And I'll simply say no. Which is what this verse concludes in what we just read. Hold on. Let me get my handy dandy verses out here. There we go. Galatians 3:25, verse 26. And after belief has come, we are no longer under a trainer. For you all are all sons of Elohim, of God, through belief in Messiah Yeshua, Jesus the Christ. The point I'm trying to make here is that the Torah, the entire Bible, is to teach us and to train us. It's not just about the 613 commands. As a matter of fact, it could be argued that Yeshua, Jesus himself, went even beyond the Torah to let us know what was required by us. He actually made it harder. And if you don't believe me, look at Matthew 5, verse 27, which says, "You have heard it that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart." Whoa, hold on. The Torah didn't say that. But now that, we got the Holy Spirit indwelling in us, that's a game changer for the good and the bad. Also, that word woman in Matthew 5:28, it means a married woman. It doesn't mean any woman. So, in addition to the supposed 613 commands, realize that Yeshua, Jesus, gave us additional commands. Now, some people say it's up to 1,000 plus commands. Yeah, I'm like, wow. And others are much more conservative, but it's not the number that counts. The point is that Yeshua, Jesus, made getting into his kingdom based on our own efforts even harder. You'll see the two links that I got there. Another resource that I have shows that Yeshua gave 48 new commands in addition to all the Torah that he kept. So then, are we all destined for hell? Thankfully, no. That's the good news. But Yeshua, but Jesus. Praise him. As we read in John 3, verse 16, "For Elohim, God, so loved the world that he gave his only brought forth Son, so that everyone who believes in him should not perish but have possess everlasting life." Ephesians 2, verse 8, "For by favor you have been saved through belief, not that of yourself. It is a gift of Elohim, not by works that anyone should boast." So I don't like just to give bad news. I actually like to bounce it off, with good news. Yes, I do. In deliverance warfare, I do got to deal with a lot of bad stuff, unfortunately. It's not like I like to do it, but we do have hope. So many of you know that it's more about being in a constant relationship with our Creator than following his commands. Even though we still need to follow his commands organically, naturally. But once we know Jesus in relationship, via relationship, we should want to be obedient to follow his Torah. Obviously, if we've been taught and given faulty biases against the Torah, well, then we're going to have a much harder time getting to know Yeshua Jesus in that way. And I'm not condemning you if you haven't been doing this. Again, I've been doing this for 10, 12 years. I had to start somewhere. I had to learn somewhere. I'm still learning. And so I'm just trying to help people understand, again, as I was saying before with the apocalypticism video I was doing, I was trying to help prepare people to get grace and mercy and how to get favor with him when times get tough. You might want to watch that video. But let's move on to this next section, which I have thus entitled, "The Heart of the Torah." So I'm going to show you where this is in the Bible. That it's not just about the 613 commands. But for that, let's get a little bit more acquainted with the daughters of Zelophehad in Numbers. This is a very interesting story. because these, in a culture where the women did not have much say, these daughters, their father died. He had no sons, and they're like, look, why should the name of our father be taken away from this clan because he had no son? Give to us a possession among our father's brothers. And then in verse 5, Moses took their case before the Lord, before Yah. And God said to Moses, you know what? They're right. That's huge. Because are you seeing what I'm seeing here? This scenario wasn't spelled out in the original commands because this happened later. Although it's in Numbers, it's still in the Torah. Why? Because the Torah can't cover every possible situation with every person over the span of eternity. What does the Torah have to say about microwaves, about AI, etc.? And these bold women came forward because they knew the heart of God. And they did it in an orderly fashion. They went to the leaders, to Moses. And I know many people get offended by the idea of the Torah, but it's really about knowing Yah's heart. We get so focused on being told what we have to do, what we can't do, it offends our flesh. So we focus so much on those aspects, we miss the bigger picture. And it states here in Matthew 23, verse 23, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you tithe mint and dill and cumin and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, the Torah. Justice and mercy and faithfulness. You ought to have these ought to done without neglecting the others." I try to keep the Torah. I can't say I'm perfect. There's times that there's people that I know that are Messianic. They, because of the world that we're in, they got to work on Saturday, the Sabbath, Friday night, Saturday night. Or, guess what? I wear clothes that are of mixed garments. That's the world I live in. But again, we still need to try. And so, I'm not the Torah police. You do it however you work that out between you and him. As you learn, you'll grow. I'm still growing. But here's a question that I have. Because in the churches today, again, as we were talking about earlier, that it's about love and faith, but I feel that those terms kind of get twisted. They're not really grounded, as I explained, in what the Bible says, as I briefly shown here. And in the same way, here's another term, a thing that I think a lot of people kind of miss. And that question is, are we really living by the Spirit? Now, in some ways that I don't completely understand, Paul says this in Romans 7, verse 14. We know that the law, the Torah, is spiritual, but I am of the flesh, sold under sin. I can't say I know exactly how the Torah is spiritual. although I do have some thoughts and some experiences regarding the unclean spirits and such. And I do know that I'm not pushing for anything that is not kosher, although the Bible is a supernatural book. That is trying to train us up for the afterlife. You know, even if we don't completely understand how that works now. But to be honest, the problem is that we aren't walking in the Spirit as many of us would like to proclaim. Because if we were, we would naturally do the Torah and beyond. As I stated earlier, doing the Torah is really setting the standard low. It's just so we don't tick him off, so he'll wipe us off the earth, the face of the earth. But if you look at Galatians 5:22 verses 25, a lot of you know this verse, you know, the fruit of the Spirit. You know the list. More than likely. If not, there it is. But it says, against such there is no Torah. And then in verse 25 it says, if we live by the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. So these things are going beyond the Torah. There's no Torah against them. Just like there's no, people talk about the curse of the law. Do you know there is no curse for doing the Torah? There's only a curse if you break it. But in case that isn't enough, here's another verse to take in regarding how the Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, has a part in the Torah. In Romans 8 verse 3, starting there. For God has done what the law of the Torah, weakened by the flesh, could not do. By sending his own Son to the likeness of sinful flesh, and for sin he condemned sin in the flesh, in order that the righteous requirement of the law, the Torah, might be fulfilled in us. You can reference Matthew 5:17, verse 20 for that, where Yeshua says, hey, I came to fulfill the law. I know a lot of people take that term to mean, that verse to mean, well, he did it, so therefore we don't have to. It's not really what it means. What it means is he showed us how to live. He was an example. And so anyways, so the law of Torah might be fulfilled in us, meaning we have to do it as well, who walk not according to the flesh, us, but we should walk according to the Spirit. For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit set their minds on the things of the Spirit. And again, we see here in these two verses that he's talking about, hey, fulfilling the Torah. And not by the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit, doing it by the Spirit. So I'll end this, in case you have any questions. I'm starting to wind this down here. On a note that Judah Gabriel Homengo wrote on his article there, the law of Christ is the law of Moses kept in a Christ-like way. And he has a YouTube on this, and he does a really a great job. Judah is very great Torah teacher. Anyways, that's not his main gig, but he's still well versed. He states that the law of Christ is basically that it demands good works. It prioritizes. All right, someone help me say that. Prioritizes. That's just not coming out tonight. People over other commandments. It is driven by genuine compassion And it requires purity of heart. And so the Torah is not just about commands. It actually is about love. And there are weightier matters where, you know what, sometimes we have to put people over. If there was a fire on the Sabbath, guess what? You're supposed to put those people over other commandments. You know, you would put out the fire, you would do things that you normally wouldn't do, because it's a day of life. Now, I'll just say this. I'll end on this note. So maybe after listening to this, you don't feel compelled to follow the Torah, or at least not yet. And that's okay. Because even, as I stated before, Bible believers know to at least follow the 10 Commandments, which are a part of the Torah, so you would still be doing it some. You just may not receive all of the benefits of being obedient. And I can't necessarily say that you're going to get all those benefits in this lifetime, but I think it's in Matthew 5, somewhere thereabouts, that says, you know, if you want to be great, well then do these commandments, you know, teach these commandments and do them, or, you know, don't do them. But it doesn't say that you won't get into heaven, you know, because again, it's not, the Torah doesn't get you into heaven, it's belief in Yeshua and Jesus. I'm just trying to help you invest in yourself. You know, not an IRA, not a 401k plan, not into gold, but faith in Yeshua and His Word, because I believe that the benefits will be worth it in the afterlife. So, that's all that I got. And so, I've actually been praying for Yeshua to show me more about, you know, the Torah being spiritual. Like, what does that mean? And so, if He lets me know, I will pass that on to you. And so, I'm wanting to test a few things out in some of the sessions that I do. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I hope that this helps you in some kind of way. You know, we've just divided. There's so many different camps of understanding, and you know the enemy's help with that. I know they kind of twist things around, but I do believe that as we come to this tribulation times, it seems like there is a push by others that I know that are, you know, messianic, to help get the word out. Anyways, I see there's not any questions, so you can post them later, or any comments you got later. I will try to get to them. And if you liked this teaching, you know, please click the like button or subscribe. But this is Noe with Walk with Yah Ministry. Please share this ministry with people that you know, because there's a lot of people that don't know what it is that they're fighting. They don't know how to get... they may not even know the word in some instances, even if you go to church and stuff like that. A lot of the pastors stuff, they don't teach the things that I teach here at Walk with Yah. And so I'm trying to help the masses. But I hope this helps you. And just remember, maybe your miracle could be next. Shalom. This is Noe.